Welcome to Standardize Your Agile Security. These are thoughts on information security and risk management in an agile culture. My hope is that regardless of what agile looks like for you, we will touch on some principles and we will explore some opportunities that you have to not only accept and embrace agile within your culture, but also find a level of assurance around your information security and your risk management. So with that, I'd like to begin with a story of a couple of friends of mine. One of them is a Scrum Master, and he runs several development teams and delivery teams in our enterprise. The other one, he's a partner with me over in information security. And he and I quite often share similar views, but having come from development, I can understand our Scrum Master's viewpoint and his desire. But today we got to a point where I was sitting with my friends. Now, the Scrum Master, I'm going to call him Big Julie. Big Julie, he runs a couple of teams and he does a great job. He's a wonderful coach. He advances not only agile, but also development skills. So he's got a lot of value in being a partner for us. But he and my buddy Mark, they were really at it today. And Mark just spouted off something. And I thought, this is really too much. I can't handle this. We need to find some way to get along. Mark says to my friend Julie, "Friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Agile, not to praise it. The evil that methodologies do lives after them, but the good is oft interred with their bones, so let it be with Agile." First off, being at Chili's, that really didn't go over with the other patrons around us, so I tried to kind of calm Mark down a little bit. I was like, dude, you gotta tone it back a little. But after we got through that process and we could begin discussing this, I thought there really are some things that both sides have that we want to discuss without losing the characteristics. We can't lose the characteristics of being responsive and being engaged with our customers and speed to market, being able to deliver things quickly, but at the same time, we can't let go of assurances and assertions that we can make and the ability to back that up with demonstrable evidence, both for regulatory and statutory requirements and for other stakeholders that we have. So I had to try and find some way to work this out with the two guys and from their different viewpoints. So I turned to Big Julie. I said, "Man, I get it. I've got a couple decades in development. I can understand what you're looking for, but could you maybe articulate this out to our buddy Mark? He's not been on a development team. He's not had deadlines applied to him in the same way in his career. So let's just talk about some of the stuff that's going on. What's the value?" First thing that comes out is, "Man, you're solving problems." He said, "Agile truly solves a lot of problems for me. Things that heretofore I've not been able to accomplish. I've been behind the eight ball with my business partners. Man, it wipes some of those out. It puts control back in the hands of the delivery teams, the solution teams. As they work through their collaboration with their partners, they begin to see much more rapidly what it is that their partner wants. They're delivering smaller pieces and able to have fine-tune adjustments as they work with their partners closer, not having a prescriptive process that they work through where they might be held up because there may not be personnel, resources, somebody who has the ability or the time to spend looking at what they have. Man, we really love how this removes some of the barriers and some of the problems for us." I said, "Okay, well, let's go back to the roots and begin talking about this because, Mark's still not convinced." Mark's like, "Yeah, you've solved those problems, but we have others." I said, "Okay, all right, let's begin looking. Where did this flow out of?" And I don't want to go all the way back to Henry Ford or even part of the way back to Taishi Ono, or, we're not even going to go all the way back to the theory of constraints that Goldratt produced about how some things get stopped in the process. We're going to assume that it's matured a little bit beyond that, but we're going to stop and begin to look at the Agile software development, the manifesto for Agile. And I blurred this out here because we're not going to dig in very much. We're just going to highlight on the fact that it addresses some concerns, and the manifesto says that we prefer certain things when we're developing solutions. Now, this happens to say software, but the reality is nowadays, because what we deliver to our business and what our business uses to deliver to our customers, it isn't always software that we're developing, It's quite often solutions that we compose. It may be pieces of software that we write. It may be services that we purchase. It may be something that we rebrand. But in the end, it becomes something that is our business. And as much as we can get away from some of those the non-core business pieces, we don't want to invest too much time, resources, and effort in those non-core areas and find that our core areas are lacking. So there are some principles that the manifesto outlines that are easy enough to understand and see what we get out of those. I'm just going to highlight a few here. The preference for individuals and interactions, the preference for working software, and again, we would say working solutions, the customer collaboration, the fact that it empowers responsiveness. It puts us in a place where as development teams, as solution deliverers, we value being engaged with people rather than reading or writing documentation. We value producing a working solution, even if it's not complete, putting something in front of our partners that our partners can see and react to, so that we're not waiting 3 months or 6 months or in some cases 12 months to put a solution in front of somebody only to have them, number one, because of the size, the scale of what we're giving them, they have to evaluate a lot of it, and they begin writing notes on this isn't right, and this isn't right, and this isn't right. And in reality, that's the way that delivery works for solutions. Anybody who's done this for very long realizes that what somebody tells you they want at the beginning may not in fact be the thing that they're looking for, because they may not understand when they're describing it. You may not understand when you're receiving what their statement is. The faster we can get something from our understanding of what someone requested back to them so that they can react to it, the more responsive we can be, the faster we can deliver solutions that are, in fact, refined to be what it is that the customer wants. We build that feedback loop in the process. Lots of value here. There's nothing wrong with these things that the Agile Manifesto says that we prefer. It's a great way to do business. Customers tend to love this. So we said, okay, great. And Mark could say, I'm beginning to see some of the value. And as Julie and I started talking through some of the experiences we've had in development and delivery, he could understand. Mark could understand what was going on. It lowered his frustration a little bit, but it never really took it all the way away. So I was able, from my experience working in information security and working alongside Mark, I was able to kind of slide over and maybe present a little bit to Julie as we talked about it. I said, well, Julie, here's the thing. I get that there were problems in the larger waterfall or even iterative methodology, delays, gate reviews, lack of resources. You were delivering larger pieces of a solution to your customer, and you didn't have a more engaged feedback loop. So I get how difficult that was, but at the same time, from our side, there's still some problems that we see. If we move towards Agile wholeheartedly or completely without any limitation of what we're going to start with and ramping it up, what we can find is that Agile tends to prefer functional requirements. And the reason that I say that is the whole idea of putting a solution, or at least a piece of a solution, in front of a customer, having them evaluate it and reply back with what is or particularly is not to their desire, they're focused on functional requirements, things they can see. My example would be if I put an interface in front of a user and the user's desire is that has a search capability. I might have a box of some kind into which someone can type, and when they type and they click the go search or they hit the enter or return key, functional requirement is if that thing does absolutely nothing, it's non-functioning. Functionally, I want it to any number of things. Perhaps go retrieve a set of data and show what came back from a data store. Perhaps I want that search to initially filter so that as someone is typing, they might see a whole body. It might make one call back on the first letter and retrieve a whole body of data. And as the user continues to type into the search field, it might actually provide a filtering mechanism, a filtering capability that would apply to the data that's coming back. again, it doesn't matter exactly what the functionality is, but the engagement between the solution delivery team and between the customer is they're testing functional requirements. Does this do a thing? Does it do what I want? Now, they may also test design requirements. I don't like the way it looks. Well, that's great. I'm giving you data back. The first answer I want, the first response I want is it working to your specifications, to your liking? Is this what you want it to do? Now tell me how you want it to look. And we'll begin building that out. And perhaps you have two different teams who are working on that. You may have a design team from a user experience graphical standpoint, and you may have a different team from a functionality standpoint. But that gets into how those teams are organized and what they're taking in terms of how they break that up. And if it's in a Scrum team, you probably have one or more people running different pieces of that. So it's all the same team. The whole team wins or loses, succeeds or fails, advances or is held up together, right? So it's not just one person, but it's a process. The thing that really gets us over on the other side of the table with Mark and me as we're talking to Big Julie is we're losing the non-functional requirements. What's not included in this is perhaps our company requires that when you make that call, you use an encrypted pipeline. Perhaps the connection between the user interface and the backend data store has a requirement for it to be encrypted over TLS using certain cipher standards or algorithms. There's no way for the customer to know that. That tends to be particularly technical in nature. And even if it wasn't, there's no insight for the customer at that point, the business user, in this case, to know whether that's occurring or not. That becomes effectively to the customer that Julie's team is talking to, which may be the business owner, business analyst. It becomes for them a non-functional requirement, and it's a moot point. They're not interested in that at that level. Because of the way that Agile addresses the teams engaging the customer, some of our requirements and our desires are lost, and yet they're still valuable not only to the company, but they're valuable to the company because industry may suggest that. Regulatory or statutory requirements may require it. Some of our key stakeholders, like customers, if you have a large external customer, a business that wants to use you, they may require that contractually. So we can't miss that. And unfortunately, Agile doesn't give us a great mechanism at this point, especially when you're just beginning to adopt it in your culture and adopt it in your environment. That's typically not one of the very first things that you focus on implementing. So that's a hang up that we have that we want to see in our implementation in our environment. We want to see an advance on that somehow we can get some of these non-functional requirements from security, risk management, privacy standpoint. We want to get those into the pipeline, get them onto the backlog, and make sure that they're prioritized effectively to meet a reasonable level of risk mitigation. So some of them may not make it into the first sprint. Some of them may. Some of them may be so critical that perhaps containerizing an application on a mobile device or providing an encrypted pipeline is so critical that it comes off the backlog and it's prioritized to make it in the first sprint. But right now, we have to build out that process of getting the non-functional requirements into this. And quite frankly, some of the team members are pretty junior on Big Julie's team, and if they happen to be tasked with a piece of this, there's no real guarantee for us that they would build that security in at the beginning. We also find inconsistent solutions at times. So we might have one of Julie's teams who's more advanced, more seasoned, has more experience, and they may know that there's already a solution or that we even have a pattern in place that they should use. Some others may not, which leads to reinventing certain solutions. That's a concern for us because in information security and privacy, in risk management, anything that we can standardize around risks or security makes it lowers the cost for us to implement. It lowers the cost for us to audit it. So when logs are generated, the log output or the output from the application into the log should look consistent. It makes it easier for us to monitor that information, to alert based on things that are anomalies, and then to decide whether we need to take an action, and if so, what action we might take. When we have inconsistent solutions, that something that is consistent between applications is redeveloped over and over to the likings or the predilection of whatever it is that that developer who was tasked with that might have, it doesn't provide us a consistent interface or mechanism for collecting information, monitoring it, or in some cases even testing it very well. I think we have a solution for that we're going to address going forward. But anyway, this is a problem that for us, we'd like to have this addressed. We also find that because there are inconsistencies in the way that some of the processing occurs, some of the data is handled, the way that some of the connections are built, it can incur technical debt. The fact that we have to go back and redo work that could have been done differently from the beginning could have been done consistently, and had we pulled out some of that work and made it into perhaps an enterprise level, a horizontal service, if you will, it may have not only provided us with the consistency that we were missing up in the second bullet point, but it also would have provided us with a set place to go and change it, so that we don't have 10 applications, all of which are doing something pretty close to the same but slightly different. We might have one API, we might have one service that did all the heavy lifting around some piece of functionality, and we would only have to go to that one place and make that change. So we can incur technical debt if we're just focused on the piece that that Agile team is working on. I'm not saying that these have to be outcomes, but as Mark and I have engaged some of the applications that our enterprise is delivering, these are some of the things that we found. Now, you may say we're much more mature in our implementation, and that's great. But unfortunately, I hear some of my peers out in the security industry running into things like this. So I don't think that we're alone. I don't think this is anomalous in our environment. Finally, here's the last one, and this is an issue, a principle that we try and employ, and we try and keep in mind in security, and that is anytime processing or data crosses boundaries, it can provide an opportunity for unequally implemented security. So whatever controls we have, if we have small bits of code that are discrete, that are built and are not initially designed to work with other functionality, other pieces of code, other services, it can create a boundary where one or the other side of that equation, as the processing passes across the boundary, we may have inconsistent security application within one side or the other. And that transition can quite often become a place that has vulnerabilities. It presents cracks and gaps in our security process. And it means that we have to test more end to end rather than a single test where we're testing something that's going to be delivered. I think we're willing to work around that in security. I think that for us, we understand testing something from beginning, from soup to nuts. People used to call it string testing. Testing it from the inception of the operation to the conclusion and breaking down, tearing down the communication. That is a piece that I think that we have grown more open to the idea, and people have tools now to work through that process. But this is a concern that we have. And so what it leads us to do is, even though in a sprint, one of the delivery teams might have a solution that they say, we only changed one piece of the solution. We hope that we can educate, inform, and come alongside our partners in those delivery teams to understand that just because one piece changed, we may still need to test this from a security standpoint or privacy standpoint from end to end. It's not just what you touched in the sprint. It's the fact that something in that sprint got changed. And so we need to ensure that as we go across all the boundaries of these compositional pieces of a solution, we maintain a consistent level of security. As we describe this, when the tenor of our conversation began to lower, Big Julie could understand some of these things. So I'm hopeful that it will make sense to you. We went through kind of a retrospective ourselves as we were sitting around the table just talking about this. And it seemed like each could see value from the other's position. So the points of view expanded a little bit. The conversation grew a little bit. It wasn't just a no, you can't do that, and hey, guess what? I have the big stick now because our company wants Agile, so I get to force my point. It was more a meeting of minds and an understanding of that position. And we were able to see where maybe in retrospect, some of our conversations, we had focused on using our own terminology and not understanding our peers' terminology or our partners' terminology in this process, not understanding what their drivers were. So we felt like we had gained some knowledge as we look back over previous conversations and look back over this opportunity. So now here's my analogy for a piece of this. Doesn't matter if you're big human beings or whether you're little bitty plastic things, there's always going to be some barriers as you're working through things. For people in information security, privacy, and risk management, the big plant, the big boulder right here in the middle, the big thing you're trying to get rid of may be the fact that we have drivers, both internal and external to our company, that we have to satisfy. And at the same time, our partners, our peers, the ones with whom we collaborate within delivering these solutions, they have their own. So our desire is to work together. That's really where we're coming at it. Doesn't matter which side of this thing you stand on and what you're looking at, we want to get these problems out of the way. Because the reality is our business has to continue on in an effective manner, doing business, collecting money. We have tighter budgets, most of us. And so as I'm thinking about this, I'm listening to Julie's side, I'm listening to Mark's side. The rhetoric of the conversation has lowered. We're feeling better about it. One thing came to mind, and I thought, this is the answer. I'm going to put this in front of Big Julie. I'm going to put this in front of Mark, and I'm going to hope that nobody has brass swords to stick me with or steel, because I wasn't wearing my boiled leather armor at that point. Forgive me, it's the Ides of March. I'm just stuck on this whole metaphor, so thank you for walking along with me. I think, hey, what is it that information technology people love more than anything else? What if I said I can solve your problem, I've got the absolute answer, and I proffer an answer, I put something out there for them, what is the answer that they will just eat up and they'll go, oh, that's awesome. We've heard this term used over and over. Please, we love it. We want more of it. Just share with us what it is. So I waited for a break in the conversation where both guys sat back, took a deep breath, and I said, guys, I've got your solution, and here it is. We're going to outsource. Yeah. I'm expecting that your response to this idea is about the same as theirs was. Anybody who's been in information technology for any period of time, you say outsourcing, and right off the bat, somebody's blood pressure shoots through the roof, their eyes begin to roll back in their head. You got to watch them. Maybe their head might start spinning around, and split pea soup might come flying out all over the walls. It's not something that makes us feel comfortable. When we talk about outsourcing, that is not typically something that IT people really like. But here's the thing. I'm not talking about your job. I'm not talking about outsourcing IT people. I'm not talking about outsourcing IT roles. I want to keep all the same people in place. I want us to look, instead of looking at outsourcing people, I want to outsource some of the heavy lifting, some of the ideas, the mental processing that we do. I don't want us to have to solve every one of those problems. I want to be able to take advantage of some of the mental work that's been done of people who've gone before us, people who've had smart ideas about how to get large, complex problems to work in a particular environment, how to implement something that's big and broad and complex and deep and multidimensional in my environment and my area and my problem. When we look at information security currently in 2016, it's defined by the ISC Squared group. Information security is defined within 8 domains. Those domains can become difficult to bring down to an implementable level because they're complex. And the interplay, the implications of making a or multiple decisions about security can easily produce unintended, unexpected, even unnoticed results. So we don't want to just jump in and start pulling strings because we don't know what other things are going to be moved when we do that. When we grab something, we say, I'm going to pull on this string. In information security, the implications, because security doesn't exist in a vacuum, it only exists by securing a thing. So when we yank or tug on a string on some piece of information security, there are decisions that have gone before that are tied to other areas of the business that we will actually have an implication. We will produce a result in places we may not even know about. So I want to reach outside of our organization. I want to find information about perhaps security, perhaps application security, perhaps solution security. And I want to look at what others have done and see if I can't bring that back inside. I'm not talking about getting rid of anybody. I'm talking about utilizing some thought processes that other people have had. All of a sudden, and it took a while now, a couple of drinks of water there, and sitting back, maybe having a piece of pie. It took a little while for these guys to calm down. But when they did, we were able to begin looking at some of the things that are out there in the industry. Now, for application security, which is where a Scrum Master like Big Julie, he's going to be interested in what's it going to cost my development teams when I go back to their HR people and I say, hey, we want to put them through some learning. We want to give them some education. We believe it's going to make them faster and better and more valuable. They say, what are you talking about? I say, okay, here's some that we've got out here. I've got OpenSAM, which is a product of OWASP. The OWASP project looked at the way that we develop software, and they said, okay, well, here's a software assurance maturity model. It has 4 main areas: governance, construction, verification, and deployment. And under that, it has sub areas, and each one of those areas has a maturity, a level 1, 2, or 3. And we said, okay, well, if OWASP Group, if that project has looked at reality around how we develop solutions, not just software, but entire solutions, if they've looked at that process and they have articulated some characteristics about it, they're able to say anytime you deliver some kind of a software solution, some kind of a solution for a business, and it's based on information technology and it's based on some kind of code somewhere, whether your team wrote it or you all adopted it and customized it, there are pieces that are consistent within that. If that's true in their evaluation, I ought to be able to find a similar view that lines up somewhat with this. Well, guess what? Whether you've heard of it or not, it's a group called Cigital, and Cigital is an information security team, and they've put together something called the BSIM. And if we look at the BSIM, we find that their first bullet point here, their first area, which also is broken down into sub-areas, their first area is governance. Their last area is deployment. That looks a whole lot like the OpenSAM model, doesn't it? And I start to say, if I were to dig into intelligence, and I were to dig into those SSDL touch points on the BSIM, I might find that those line up with several of the areas under construction and verification. And in fact, they do. Some of this is a matter of terminology, taxonomy, the design. Some of it is actually a philosophical approach to how we develop solutions and deliver them. I said, here's something that we can work from. Let's pick one and advance with it. So we decided to take the OpenSAM and just begin discussing it. I was quick to tell both of the guys, we can't just use the OpenSAM or the BSIM and have it produce a result. We're going to have to walk through what the OpenSAM or the BSIM says about the processes we use. We're going to have to go find ourselves a whole set of controls that we can implement, and we have to evaluate what does our organization feel is appropriate for its level of risk management, its level of privacy that it's held to. Now, once we have those pieces of information, we can step through all of the pieces of, in this case, OpenSAM, and we can choose which controls allow us to meet the level of maturity that our company wants. Now, here's the thing. Risk is a differentiator in business. I'll say it again. Risk is a differentiator in business. Whether you choose to ignore whatever risk might be out there, or whether you choose to strategically accept certain risks once you've mitigated pieces of it, it can become a differentiator for why your business is different from your competitors. It can also define which portion of the market you're looking to take advantage of. It may be that you don't want to buy the problems for yourself of a certain segment of the market. And therefore, you may not accept certain risks. You may say those are beyond the scope of what we believe we can make profitable. But knowing that piece of information about your company, knowing the vision and the policies and the directives of your executive level and your board and what they say matters to them around risk allows you to step through the processes that are attached to either the OpenSAM or the BSAM. Now, when you step through them, you're going to need something else. So let's go look and see where's all this content that I'm going to customize for my company. I'm going to sit down with two pretty smart guys who have experience. I'm going to sit down with Big Julie. I'm going to sit down over here with Mark, and I'm going to say, let's look at walking through these processes along with we know what our company wants, but along with a comprehensive list of controls that we could apply once we figure out just how secure does our company want us to be in certain areas. I promise you, if they wanted you to be totally secure, Agile wouldn't be on the table, but then again, you all wouldn't be paying for electricity and have computers connected, right? So there's some level of negotiation here. As we began looking around for lists of controls that we could pull from to say which ones meet our desire, we found that there were several out there. There's the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which it includes within the special publication 800-53, and currently it's in revision 4 as of this time. It includes about 322 different controls. ISO 27001, it has some maturity measurements. It has a whole list of controls. COBIT over here, CA's put together a diagram. I pulled the diagram, but it has its own list of controls, and COBIT, it defines everything. It defines information architecture, it defines business structure, policy process, just everything over there. So it's way more comprehensive than what we decided to look at. So we rolled all the way back to NIST's special publication 800-53 to get a set of controls that we could use as we walked through that OpenSAM process and that framework for deciding what controls we would use. And we began walking through it, and we said, okay, this is great. We were producing lists of things to tell people, here's the policy that our company has articulated, and to go along with meeting that policy, here are the technical standards that you have to meet. When you encrypt something, you must use this particular cipher, and you must use it in this way. There's not only the policy, then the requirements embedded then, and we have a standard over here, and we were giving people guidelines on how to do it. We felt great about ourselves. We were all excited. Until Big Julie said, I've sat here for about an hour as we kind of talked through this, and it was a whole lot of fun, but here's my problem, guys. I can't stop my delivery. I just can't stop my teams from delivering stuff right now long enough to teach them all this. I mean, it's great. You all are coming up with a secure solution delivery life cycle, right? A secure solution development life cycle, and that's wonderful. If I had all the time in the world, if I had infinite time to teach people, not only would I have to worry they're going to leave, because that's obviously a concern that people have when you start talking about elevating the value of the resources that you're already invested in, but I just can't get to that place where I can teach them. I said, you know what? I think we've got something in the works already. My buddy over here that works with Mark and me, Sam's got a whole group, and man, what Sam has been working on is awesome. Sam's putting together a system so that even as we write down this SDL over here, this solution development lifecycle that's based on security, even as we begin building that out and we begin socializing it to the teams, and we begin advocating for it with the teams, even as that's going on, and people say that's great, and you're beginning to raise the level of expectation, and you've produced for me a set of standards, a secure coding guideline, if you will, a technical coding process document, whatever it is that you end up calling it. Even as you're doing that, you've got to know that it's not going to be 100% right at the very beginning. It's not going to be comprehensive. And even if it was, people couldn't start on day one doing all of it. So what are you going to do to assure, because Julie, he's a smart guy. He remembered what we were talking about. He goes, you and Mark are telling me you've got to assure our customers, our business partners, our stakeholders that we're meeting a certain level, that we're advancing our security, moving it to another level. How are you going to do that if I can't give these people the time to get up to speed? And we say, hey, Sam and his team have got something going on over here. Let me show you what they're doing on the other end of the solution creation, solution development, solution delivery process. Let me show you what they're doing so that when you get to an end of a sprint, you can jump out here. They've got some stuff that's out there, some online systems, services that we can use. Some of them are in-house. Some of them we actually upload the code to. When you all get to the end of a sprint and you've got something that you think is ready to go, we've got some systems, some services. We have some licensing that we have functionality in place, the capability in place for your team to store your source code. It will immediately be built and delivered, and testing will be performed statically against the code that is delivered, and we will get a list out of that testing of highs, mediums, and lows as defined by industry standards and agreed upon by our leadership. We'll be able to talk with you in a very short fashion. At the beginning, let's plan for an hour for the first sprint. But maybe the second or third sprint, you're going to find we're down to 15 minutes and you all are looking at the list of high and medium and low vulnerabilities, what we expect the impact of those vulnerabilities, if they were actually exploited, to be. And we'll negotiate with you so that if you say, you know what, we could actually remediate the 2 highs that we have, but we don't have any more time to remediate like those 4 mediums right there. We can negotiate with your Scrum Master and your business owner, your product owner, to get some of those mediums back onto the backlog with the understanding that they need to be prioritized for the next go around. That needs to be something that you prioritize in your next sprint. But yes, go ahead and remediate, go ahead and resolve those 2 highs. So then Big Julie says, hey, we got some serious stuff we're working on. What happens if my team has, I don't know, say 4 or 5 highs and another 4 mediums, and there's no way we can even get all the highs? And so I tell you what, I think here's what we're really looking to do. Because our customers are coming to us and saying, we want to see where you're doing this. We want to see, A, that you have a process in place, B, that you're following it. We want to see that you articulate policies and that you are doing something to follow those policies, that it's not just words, you really have something you're doing. And when we talk to them, they tell us we're not the only ones who don't have all of this in place, all of it figured out in an agile culture. We're not the only ones. We're not the sore thumb sticking out. Everybody else has got this right and we don't. But what they are saying is we want to see you all maturing and moving towards a place where we have a greater degree of assurance. We have a greater level of trust that when you assert that you're doing something, we can trust it and depend on it. So we believe that if you were to, in your hypothetical situation, Julie, if you were to come back to us and you were to say, hey, guys, I've got a team that has, say, 5 highs and 4 mediums, we need to go to production in a day and a half or 2 days. We believe we can code 2 of the highs and remediate those. It would then become a discussion between security and the business owner as to if that was acceptable or if we wanted to see 3 highs gone. But what you're not going to hear is you got to do all 5 of those and all 4 of the mediums. It's not a black and white issue. It's a negotiation and a partnership, because if the business fails, if we can't deliver to our customers in a timely fashion, it doesn't matter if you're working in security, if you're a Scrum Master, if you're a delivery, if you're a senior software engineer, doesn't matter if you're an operations engineer, we're all going to be out. So our goal is to better partner with the business, better partner with the delivery teams to find an acceptable level. Keeping in mind that the things we don't get in this sprint, they have to go on the backlog, because those are findings for a reason. Those are vulnerabilities that we know can and have been exploited, even if we've not seen them exploited in our environment, or if we've not seen them exploited in this application. We know that they're there, and so we want to see those things remediated sooner rather than later, but we must see progress. We must see commitment to it. It can't be that they go onto a backlog and then 6 months from now, maybe they'll be touched, or maybe a year from now, somebody will come back around to them. What we have to have, and what our businesses, our partners, and our customers are requiring of us, is that we're progressing towards more rapid remediation. Big Julie says, that's honestly what we're trying to get to with Agile. We're trying to solve problems faster. We're trying to address today's problems today. It felt to us like we'd found a win-win, like we'd made a partnership that we could all agree with. So we left the meeting feeling pretty positive about it, that not only are we going to put together education and advocacy that is aligned with something like the NIST cybersecurity framework, so that when we talk to our customers and they look at something like NIST or ISO 27001, or even if we were to go deep into it, something like COBIT, if they look at those things and they say, are you aligned with managing your risk in the way that it's outlined here? We can answer that question effectively, and we can demonstrate evidence of the fact where we are meeting those requirements and where we might not be meeting them, but we're moving towards them very rapidly. Because in an agile environment, the thing that we're gaining is we're very responsive to the customer's desire. It doesn't matter if it's functional requirements or non-functional requirements. We want to be moving towards what they're looking for. Deliver value to them faster. So we've got that on the front end. Hopefully we build up, we encourage, we educate, we advocate, we work with the solution development and delivery teams so that they feel valuable and they feel like there's an investment in them and they feel like we care what they're working on. And on the back end, the solution development and delivery teams, the agile teams, the scrum masters, the product owners, the business owners, the capability managers, the architects who are concerned with the characteristics of what we put out there, and they say, I'm not positive that I thought through everything you had on the front end. I'm not sure if I missed something. Well, guess what? Now on the back end, we have something that helps out because it's automated. It's actually run on the source code. We can have active or dynamic analysis performed. We can find a couple of different ways to process through this and be able to tell them in black and white, absolutely, for sure, these are where we find vulnerabilities, and we'll work with you and negotiate with you for what we, the business, all the way around, feel is acceptable to go in at this stage, and we'll address the others going forward. Feels very much like a win-win for us. The whole point was we took the heavy lifting off of our shoulders. We were lifting the weight that was acceptable and appropriate for us to lift. We went through the process using OpenSAM, using a set of controls from a catalog that NIST has already produced, finding out what policies defined what our business felt was valuable versus what it felt it didn't really care about. And we produced an SDL process on the front to help people as they're thinking through, to mature their thinking process for defining the solution, considering those non-functional requirements. And on the back end, we leveraged some of the tools and capabilities that are out in the market already so that if a development team missed something, we can move ahead. Now, some people will ask us, why don't you just wait till the end and use those tools for everything? Well, number one, anytime you remediate a problem at the end of the process before you go into production, it's more costly in terms of time and money. You've already spent effort. You've already spent an expensive developer or software engineer's time. You've already paid them for what they're coding, and now you're going to have to pay them to recode it. That's not the best use. We want to train people on the front end to do things better according to what today's industry, what today's expectations are. 5 years ago, we didn't have people asking about Social Security numbers and what was getting passed on mobile devices because we didn't use it as much. As the marketplace changes, as customer expectations change, we want to be able to educate people. Nobody likes, for a different analogy, nobody likes driving down the road, seeing blue and red lights come on, or I guess blue lights come on, pulling over to the side and having an officer tell you you have an expired tag. What we really want is we want something up front that comes in the mail that says, hey, in another month, your tag is going to expire. If you'll simply send in a check, or if you'll call this number, or you go into this website, enter your credit card, you can renew your tag before you get to the point where you have to do something about it and pay a fee. We want to standardize security, privacy, and risk management by teaching people on the front end the best way to avoid problems. But recognizing that we can't always be 100% consistent, we want to have something on the back end that also assures us a level of protection and a level of insight, even though we're no more protected if we have to go into production with a set of vulnerabilities that we know of. We're no more protected by knowing about them out there, but at least now we know about them and we can work towards remediating those in the next sprint. Our goal in this process was to find the piece that fit our ability. Those are the weights that we picked up. And the other weights, we left sitting over there letting somebody else pick those up for us. Somebody else designed the Open SAM. Somebody else put the list of the catalogs and the controls in the catalog. We just wanted to pick out the ones that were appropriate for us. At the end of the day, what we're finding is we're delivering without slowing down that process. We're elevating the level of our assurance and our assertion to our customers, to our business partners, to our stakeholders, to our board. Everybody ends up a whole lot happier. I hope that these thoughts might spark some interest and some debate for you, some ideas. If you're already doing this, hit me up. You can see my links down at the bottom. Feel free to IM me, text me, email me. I'd love to hear what your success stories are. And even more importantly, I'd love to hear where you've seen the bumps in the road, something that maybe we can work towards refining. It will help us, and hopefully we'll be able to help you. Thank you very much for your time in engaging this material.